Today on The Divide, as the state opens up,
I think it's awesome being able to see people's facial expressions.
the state of emergency remains.
And I'm deeply disappointed that the Democrats in the House and Senate refuse to have a discussion about the reform of emergency powers.
I'm not sure you want to go back and reform when you won the Super Bowl.
Also, an issue that impacts us all.
Wildfires are not a partisan phenomenon.
How the White House is hoping to help with wildfires as we enter what could be another record season.
Humans are 80% of the cause of fires. We have the ability to prevent these catastrophic fires we see year after year.
Plus, the simple advice I'd give to elected leaders before they compare anything to the Holocaust. That and more as we attempt to bridge the divide. Hello and welcome to The Divide, and happy 4th of July to you. I hope you're all spending time with your family, and you might be able to do a little bit more than we otherwise would have as the state is officially reopened. And folks, I will say, they are enjoying the end of endless mandates.
It's great being out amongst everybody here, around people again.
This is my first day at work not wearing a mask. And I actually wore lipstick, and I actually feel kind of weird.
It's nice to be able to get out for sure. Come out here on the pier and see everything. It's been nice.
I think it's awesome being able to see people's facial expressions and smiles. I know he loves it.
Now that you can pretty much go to any business you want, what's the number one business you want to visit?
The bars.
Same. Governor Jay Inslee marked the occasion with a Washington Ready tour around the state, starting in Tacoma. He then headed off to Spokane and, of course, went to Seattle.
Hey, let's go team. Here we go.
The governor raising the Washington Ready flag on the Space Needle, followed by another Seattle tradition. And he caught it. Well, I'm sure he was eager to let go of that fish. There's one thing the governor is not so eager to let go of, it seems, and that is the end of the state of emergency around COVID, an emergency declaration that continues to give him tremendous power to shut businesses back down at a moment's notice. It's a topic that continues to divide lawmakers in Olympia. I asked the governor about it during his stop in Tacoma.
There's some continued concern about and discussion about emergency power reform. Why, if today we're in a good enough position to reopen fully, do we remain under a state of emergency?
Well, because there's more work to do against COVID. We know that the dangers are still profound. The Delta variant has taken over some countries, and it's more transmittable and maybe more dangerous. So we have to maintain some of our measures, including masking measures, to keep kids and the vulnerable and those who are immunologically suppressed, to keep them healthy. So we do have to maintain some of our safety standards. Now, the good news, though, none of these should stop us having fun. None of these should stop us opening our businesses. None of them should stop us from going to restaurants. We can do all the things we want to do now. We just need to do them with a little safety, including masks for those who are not vaccinated. I think people understand this, they're accepting of it, and they realize that when you're a success, don't stop what you're doing. We're following science, and I think it's going to continue to succeed.
That the governor's full answer. Also, while I was in Tacoma, I spoke with Speaker of the House, Democratic State Rep Lori Jenkins. I asked Jenkins whether she might be open to working with her Republican colleagues to reform emergency powers, not just for this governor, but for future governors, especially considering some of her Democratic colleagues in Pierce County, you might remember, they wrote that letter and expressed frustration with the governor's mandates back in May.
Do you believe there's any place where there's room for improvement on the emergency power front?
Well, we'll take a look. I think the best, I work in public health in my career, the best time to look at emergency powers and look at the way you handle an emergency is when the emergency is kind of done. And then you can really reflect with a cold, clear eye and look at whether or not there should be reform. So maybe there are, maybe there aren't. There is a task force that we authorized in the session this year, and that task force will take a look at that amongst many other things, and we'll see if there are recommendations that come out for next year.
So it's not a no, it's a maybe. So the following day, I was just tracking Inslee all around on his tour. When he was in Seattle, I again asked him about this issue with Speaker Jenkins' remarks in mind.
Governor, House Speaker Lori Jenkins was with you in Tacoma yesterday. Yes. I asked her after the fact whether she supported emergency power reform. She said once we're out of the emergency, she would be willing to look back and in hindsight figure out is there anything that could be adjusted. Would you be willing to give that a hard look and to work with the legislature to kind of in hindsight readjust if needed when it comes to the extent of your emergency powers?
Listen, we're always open to ideas, but I think at the moment we have had such tremendous success in our state relative to other states. I don't see a reason for that. The calls we have made have been very difficult, but they have succeeded. I'm not sure you want to go back and reform when you won the Super Bowl. And we've won the Super Bowl of the COVID pandemic. And the reason is we have saved tens of thousands of lives. The decisions we have made, the decisions of business owners and families, means that tens of thousands of people are alive today. I'm not sure I want to reform a system that won the Super Bowl. So I don't see a reason for that today. But listen, we're always open to ideas. And I'm sure there will be things we learn as we look back at the science of this. And I'm willing to obviously learn.
I don't love the Super Bowl analogy, considering that more than 5,000 people died in our state and businesses closed, but that's just me. Who am I? Just a lady on the news. Among those who have pushed the hardest for this emergency power reform, talked about it all session, is House Minority Leader J.T. Wilcox, the Republican from Yelm. I asked him about the continuation of the emergency and what Democrats and Republicans might be willing to come together to work on when it comes to making changes.
So first and foremost, states reopen. Long time coming. Your reaction to that?
Well, I'm glad we're open as well. I think we could have done it earlier. John Brown and I have been saying this for quite some time. And, the people of Washington have figured out how to adapt. And I think we could have used that adaptation skill to save a lot of businesses and keep from creating this sense of inertia that we have now, where a recent Gallup poll I saw said 40% of Americans think that they're not going to get back to normal. We have to overcome that because normal was pretty good.
So the state is fully reopened, but we are still living under a state of emergency due to the coronavirus. I imagine you're not happy with that, sir.
No, I think this is absolutely corrosive to the form of government that we all expect to have. And I'm deeply disappointed that the Democrats in the House and Senate refuse to have a discussion about the reform of emergency powers. Nobody argues that we shouldn't have emergency powers. There's emergencies. The legislature isn't always in session, and the governor should be able to react to those. But to be left in a situation where there is no end to an emergency, or maybe the end is when the governor says it is, that's not what any of us grew up thinking was our form of government.
I did get a chance to speak to House Speaker Lori Jenkins when she was in Tacoma for the reopening, and I asked her the question about emergency powers. And she said she's open to it, but she did not want to make any decisions about emergency powers in the midst of the pandemic. She wanted to wait until we were out of it and can look back in hindsight and see what needs to be fixed. So I guess first I'd ask you of her response. Do you believe that that makes sense to not alter emergency powers while the emergency is still going on?
No, I don't. I think that the legislature was in session. Our job is to legislate. We had at the time that we gavelled in, we'd had about 10 months worth of experience with this. To say that we need more time, I think I don't see the sense in that. And again, this shouldn't be Republican or Democrat. This should be about good government for the future. And I think Lori is the speaker is not unhappy with this governor, but the next time we have an emergency, it may be a governor that she doesn't trust as much as she trusts this one. That's what we should be thinking about.
Do you believe her when she says that it's something she's willing to take a serious look at next time around in this coming session?
I wouldn't question her honesty, but I wish that she would have thought that while we were in session this year.
Yeah, this issue is not going away. It's going to continue to be a big issue through the year and into next session, so we'll see what happens with it. And again, not just about Governor Inslee, but we're going to have a pandemic again. I know we don't want to talk about that, but, you know, can we learn anything from this time around, really anything at all? And then also as it pertains to emergency powers, should there be a little more oversight from our legislative body? So we're going to be discussing this one again. And also, as it pertains to the state's reopening, next segment, we're going to be reading some of the thank yous that you wanted to send to those in your life who have helped you over the past 16 months of the pandemic, so stick around for those. Also coming up, Commissioner of Public Lands Hillary Franz on increasing wildfire dangers and what she's asking of all of you as you celebrate the 4th of July holiday. Also, my advice to politicians who just can't resist evoking the Holocaust, and the advice is simple. Stick around. President Joe Biden meeting with Western state governors, including ours, to talk about the growing danger of wildfires.
Wildfires are not a partisan phenomenon. They don't stop at a county or a state line. The extreme heat we're seeing in the West is not only a risk amplifier for wildfires, it's a threat in and of itself. People are hurting. It's more dangerous for kids to play outside. Roads are buckling under the heat. I need not tell all of you.
Biden announcing he will give pay raises to federal firefighters and try to overall build up the nation's readiness to battle these fires. Meanwhile, today, on this 4th of July, the extreme heat we've had is top of mind as the wildfire risk looms large. The Commissioner of Public Lands, Hillary Franz, put it out in this tweet, pretty blunt. Can we all agree that it's too hot to be lighting anything on fire? Given that we're all celebrating today in various ways, we wanted to speak with Franz about the dangers the state faces and really reiterating that fire season is just ramping up.
So, Commissioner, is it still too hot to burn stuff?
It is way too hot to burn anything, and it's going to be too hot for a while to burn anything.
You know, we've already had more wildfires than we do typically, and you also had some firefighters injured, right? Can I just ask how they're doing?
That's right. Yeah. So we had three firefighters that were injured, one pretty significantly, and he is recovering, but it's going to be a road here. And it's one of my own. So this is the first one of my own firefighters that has been injured.
So obviously, you know, we approach this conversation through the lens of that, how dangerous wildfires can be, how devastating they can be. So just take people through for the 4th of July, what they can and cannot do quickly.
Yeah, so we just issued a burn ban, which basically there cannot be campfires, there can't be fireworks, there cannot be debris pile burning. Anything that's sort of going to create a spark out there in the landscape is basically prohibited. And the reason is because we've seen really hot temperatures, unprecedented hot temperatures, and we've seen long dry period, and it's going to continue for a while. With a hot, dry landscape, all it takes is one little tiny spark out in the woods, out in the grasslands, and now all of a sudden you're not going to just have a tiny little fire that can easily be put out, but you're going to have 1,000 to 100,000 acre fire.
So the fireworks rules are very piecemeal across the state, depending on where you live. Why not do a full-fledged ban on fireworks?
So I only have the authority to issue burn bans on the lands that our agency fights fires on. So 13 million acres of land, that's our jurisdictional authority. And so we went and did the extensive burn ban to cover all 13 million acres.
So for folks who live in an area where it is okay for them to do fireworks, what is your advice to them?
My advice is first, everybody needs to realize that right now the conditions are so dangerous that it is too easy for a fire to get started that would threaten their family, themselves, their neighborhood, their community, frankly, our firefighters. And my biggest message to people is humans are 80% of the cause of fires. We have the ability to prevent these catastrophic fires we see year after year. And we have the ability not only protect our communities, but actually protect our firefighters who are putting their lives on the front lines. I think about it kind of like COVID. We all remember where it was an ask for people to take steps to create that defensible space around themselves, to wear masks, not just to keep themselves healthy and their family healthy, but to keep their neighbors and their community and our first responders, our firefighters who are putting their lives on the line. The same The same rationale applies in the context of wildfires.
As we approach this season, you were on many times over the last couple of years fighting for some additional wildfire funding. Does that kick in? Is that influencing or impacting your ability to, or helping your ability to fight fires this season?
Unfortunately not. We don't get those resources until end of July. And our goal here is to hire 100 new firefighters, to bring in more air resources, and to also drive more resources down to the local fire districts, many of them very limited resources, limited firefighters. Unfortunately, it'll take time to hire and train those firefighters, to get those aircraft on contract. So much of the resources aren't really going to appear until the 2022 fire season. And the reason I want people to really understand how significant this crisis is that Washington State has experienced a very hot, dry, early season, and it will likely go well into September. Our firefighters have already been fighting over 560 fires. We had 60 fires they fought just on Monday alone. That means exhausting, tiring, difficult conditions. They get worn out, and it gets harder for them to keep themselves safe. In addition to that, we know that the western part of the United States is also under significant drought and heat conditions, and they're facing fires like us. That means resources that we usually depend on, going to the federal government, going to other states, won't be available. We are basically likely going to be having to fight this year on our own, just like we had to do a lot of it last year during the Labor Day firestorm.
So we saw President Biden meet virtually with Western state governors to talk about, in part, wildfires. Is there anything coming out of the White House right now that you think is promising?
I think, first of all, we are definitely seeing an increase in the federal government increasing the amount of air resources and firefighters and other equipment. So they have definitely taken last year's catastrophic wildfires truly to heart and said, we have got to be ready. And they're seeing the drought conditions to get those air resources available and the firefighters. That definitely is coming to fruition. And we're hoping, I think the challenge is we have more states that are going to be in crisis, I believe, including our own. And there's still only so many resources to be found.
All right, Commissioner of Public Lands, Hillary Franz, we appreciate your time. And I know I speak for everyone watching when I say thank you to the men and women who are out there fighting those fires. I know they're doing a dangerous job for us. So please give them our best.
I will. I urge everybody to take all steps necessary to take care of themselves, but also take care of our firefighters. We need it right now more than ever.
Yeah, and the bottom line is just be responsible. I mean, you guys are adults. I don't need to tell you that. You know what causes a fire and what doesn't. So just be responsible. I also had to, just on a little funny note, I had to share this tweet from France. I don't know who's running her Twitter account, but they're pretty good. Some solid advice here. This 4th of July weekend, ignite a spark on Tinder. Don't ignite sparks on Tinder. For those of you too old to know what Tinder is, well, I will just say that you're very, very lucky to never have used it to find a date. All right, back to the pandemic and the state's reopening. I asked you guys, it's been a challenging 16 months, so I wanted to give you guys an opportunity to thank anyone you wanted for helping you get through what was a really challenging time. So I wanted to get to a few of those. We'll get to as many as we can here. Betty Cowgill wants to thank her husband, James. There he is. Nice beard, man. She writes, I had to start chemo by pill form in January 2020. My doctor said, stay home because my immune system is compromised. Then the pandemic happened. He was my strength. He kept me positive. That's awesome. Stacy, my thanks goes to my incredible husband, Kevin Grimm. He is an amazing man. I lost my taste buds and smell during the pandemic. Still haven't recovered. He went to work every day because I could not. Let's see. Josh Boyd, he sent us this picture. Hello. I would like to thank my father, retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Boyd, for helping my family during this pandemic. He's always been the best father and grandfather one could ask for. Love you, Dad. That's great. Let's see. Yvonne wanted to thank her Zumba instructor, Hiromi Sorrell. She wrote, not once did she cancel a class. Her goal was to keep us sane during the pandemic, and she did. Very cheerful and so motivating. Would create different dress-up days like Seahawks Day. I think that's what we're seeing there probably. Saying she deserves a great big thank you. And just one more I had to fit in. Larry Logsden would like to thank none other than his friend Jack Daniels. I agree. I had a lot of Jack and ginger ales during the pandemic. Very funny. That one made me laugh. And I want to thank all of you for over the past 16 months just trusting us to cover this unprecedented story. And, you know, hopefully we did the best we could, got you the information that you needed. And the story is not done, by the way. I mean, we just talked about emergency power reform. So we are just coming out of the mandates, but the impacts are far from over. All right, coming up after the break, we've been hearing too many comparisons to the Holocaust, and I have a message for those who just can't help themselves. Stick around. There was near universal condemnation about the actions of Republican State Representative Jim Walsh, and here's why. Walsh of Aberdeen wore the Star of David, it's pretty small there, but you can see it on his left side, during an event in Lacey. In his mind, he was doing it as a way to protest vaccine rules, likening the way that Nazis persecuted Jewish people during the Holocaust to the singling out of people who don't get a vaccine. This was a story first reported by the Seattle Times. Democrats and Republicans alike were quick to respond. Democratic Congressman Derek Kilmer tweeting that the comparison, quote, dishonors the victims of the Holocaust, the survivors and their families, as well as the brave American military and our allies who fought and died to defeat the Nazis. There is no place for this kind of dangerous and inflammatory rhetoric here in Washington or anywhere in our nation. The highest-ranking Republican in Olympia, House Minority Leader J.T. Wilcox, offered this.
That yellow star is a symbol for some of the most horrific things that have happened in human history, certainly in recorded human history, to the Jewish people. That symbol belongs to them. I don't think it's anyone else's business to be using that symbol for the moment when they feel like they're being a victim.
Now, the backlash was understandably swift. Representative Walsh quickly apologized in an interview on the Jason Rant Show on KTTH.
Let me start right away by saying this gesture went too far. It was inappropriate and offensive, and I'm terribly sorry that it happened and that I was part of it.
And look, good thing he apologized. He should apologize. And unlike GOP Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who made similar comparisons, it didn't take him a trip to the Holocaust Museum to learn the error of his ways.
The horrors of the Holocaust are something that some people don't even believe happened, and some people deny, but there is no comparison to the Holocaust. And there are words that I have said and remarks that I've made that I know are offensive, and for that I want to apologize.
You don't say. You know, I preach a lot on this show about moral consistency, setting a clear standard by which you determine right and wrong and sticking to it regardless of what person of what political party violates that standard. And when it comes to Nazi or Holocaust comparisons, it should be a pretty easy standard to maintain. As I've said many, many times before, when you feel the urge to use a Nazi comparison, just don't. I said as much when blogger and weather guru Cliff Mass compared broken windows in downtown Seattle to the Night of Broken Glass, a night of violence that included Nazis smashing in the windows of Jewish-owned businesses. I said as much when a local progressive blogger called the Republican National Convention a Nazi party. And of course, I said as much when Marjorie Taylor Greene compared mask mandates to the Holocaust. And now I'll say the exact same thing to Representative Walsh, who I hope has learned his lesson from this ordeal. When you're thinking about comparing something, anything, to the horrors Jewish people endured during the Holocaust, just don't. Just don't. It really is that simple. All right, thank you so much for joining us on The Divide. As always, we welcome, and yes, we do want your feedback. You can find me on Facebook and Twitter, or you can send me an email, thedivide@fox.com. And please go out and enjoy 4th of July. The state is reopened. We've had such a beautiful week, but just remember what Commissioner of Public Lands Hillary Franz said. Things are dry out there. You guys know that. Again, I don't need to preach this to you, but we want to make sure we keep our firefighters safe during this time and all the homes and everything. So just be smart while you're having fun. See you tomorrow on Q13 News This Morning.